right. We are on Facebook. As I put it in the stands. Sometimes they have glitches on the internet. It's not my fault. This is a glitch from Facebook. Okay, we are ready to roll. Give me 1 second. Stream. All right, I've just set some parameters here. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, sorry for the delay, but now we are ready to start, and we're going to chant Radha Madhava. And Facebook we're broadcasting on separately with a separate device. So, let you see me. Whoop. What's happening here? All right. There we go. Okay. All right. Let's say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay. Let's start. Right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Malabha Giri Bharadhari Gopi Jana Malabha Giri Bharadhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidakacharya also Tata Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Rem, say Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Gijai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopagavata Sayam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagadata Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is to the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hari Bol. So, welcome to the Bhagavad Gita class. So, before continuing with the chapter 4, text 8, we'll offer our respects to Srila Prabhupada. So, Om Megana Timidanda Shah, Gadanjana Shlakya Chakshur Unmeditam, Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who would so kindly open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, we will continue with the Bhagavad Gita. And here is Bhagavad Gita. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. All right. Let's move that to the side. Okay, and another famous verse. Phew. There's actually a pair, which is the previous verse. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirabhaviti bharata avyutana dharmasya tadatmadam srijamyaham. That's number 7, the verse we read yesterday. And this second verse forms a pair with that verse. And actually I'll translate yesterday's verse, which is not on the screen. But it says, whenever there is yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever there's a decline in dharma, Glani Bhavati Bharata, Abhutanama Dharmasya Tadatmanam Srijamyaham, that I come down, I have an avatar. The word avatar means to cross down. So Krishna comes down. And today we're going to describe similar topics to those we described yesterday about the different types of avatars. But we'll begin with this verse, which is a companion verse to the verse we just recited, which was number 7. This verse is number 8. Purachanaya sadunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. A Purachanaya for deliverance, sadunam of the devotees, vinashaya, for the annihilation, cha and dushkritam, the miscreants, dharma, principles of religion, samstapana artaya, to reestablish sambhavami, I do appear, yuge, millennium after millennium. To deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. According to Bhagavad Gita, holy man is a man in Krishna consciousness. A person may appear to be irreligious, but if he has the quality, we actually read this. We actually read this already. Yes. We actually read it. So text 9. Yes, text 9 is the next text. Janma karma chame divyam hevam yo veti tatvataha Chaktva deham purna janma naitimamos eti sorjana. A janma birth karma work cha also may of mind divyam transcendental evam like this. Ya anyone who veti knows tatvataha in reality chaktva leaving aside deham this body puna again janma birth na never. Eti does attain mam unto me eti does attain sa he Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Hmm. So Prabhupada explains that the Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. One who can understand the truth of his appearance of the personality of God is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Let me just see something. All right, let's continue reading. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after trouble and many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body, and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita, the 5th chapter, text 33, it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations, Advaita, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers, as stated in the Vedas in the Purusha Bodhini Upanishad. Eko Devo Nitya Lilanu Rukto Bhakta Vyapi Hridyantaratma. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead is internally engaged in many, many transcendental forms and relationships with his unalloyed devotees. This Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authority of the Vedas and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting this truth on faith, one can, without doubt, attain liberation. The Vedic version, Tattvamasi, is actually applied in this case. Anyone who understands Lord Krishna to be the Supreme, or who says unto the Lord, you are the same Brahman, the personality of Godhead, is certainly liberated instantly, and consequently his entrance into the transcendental association of the Lord is guaranteed. In other words, such a faithful devotee of the Lord attains perfection, and this is confirmed by the following Vedic assertion. Tameva viditvati mrityum eti nanya panta vijate vinaya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there's no other way to achieve this perfection. That's from the Shvetasvatara Upanishad 3:8. That there is no alternative means that anyone who does not understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is surely in the mode of ignorance. And consequently, he will not attain salvation simply, so to speak, by licking the outer surface of the bottle of honey or by interpreting the Bhagavad Gita according to mundane scholarship. Such empiric philosophers may assume very important roles in the material world, but they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. Such puffed-up mundane scholars have to wait for the causeless mercy of the devotee of the Lord. One should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and devotion, and in this way attain perfection. So, this verse, of course, states that one has to know the transcendental nature of the Lord's appearance and activities. Now, that's a type of knowledge that's called sambandha. Sambandha means to understand Krishna's ontological, is a big word, ontological position in relationship to us, in relationship to the material world, and how Krishna's activities are eternal. They're called Nitya Lila, whereas our activities are Anitya Lila. Anitya means they are temporary activities. Just like all the things we're doing in this world, they will never be heard of again. Just like Shakespeare says, life's a poor player that struts and frets his time upon the stage, and then is heard no more. So next verse. Vitaraga vaya kroda man maya mam pashritaha bahava jnana tapasa puta mad bhavam agataha. Vita free from raga attachment by a fear, krodha, and anger. Matmaya, fully in me, mom in me, upashritaha, being fully situated, bahava, many. Jnana of knowledge, tapasa, by the penance, putaha, being purified, mat bhavam, transcendental love for me, agapaha, attained. So being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Pretty self-explanatory. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. So, in other words, people think, how can God have a form? Because the form is limiting him. This is a common comment that we hear, common objection that we hear, that if you say God has a form, then he's only in one place and he's limited. And our answer to that objection is that if you say God doesn't have a form, in other words, he's lacking something, you're limiting him. We say that God has a localized form, and also he has a formless manifestation too, which we're going to hear about in a second in this purport. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. In other words, they worship nature, they worship something called the universal form. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them, because they've had so much bad experience with individuality and personality in this world. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such persons, or such people, are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. That doesn't mean that they actually take directly intoxication, but they take shelter of some type of diversion. And they think that the hallucination or their imagination is a spiritual vision. But it's simply a projection of their own material experiences. One has to get rid of all the three stages of attachment to the material world. This is very important. One is negligence of spiritual life. I just want to stay here and enjoy Epicurean. Fear. Second is fear of a spiritual personal identity. And the third is the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. So actually, two of those are effective suicide or spiritual suicide. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of God. So actually, it's a symptom of the last stage of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life, according to the verse we're just going to read now from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the last stage is called prema. Very important verse. According to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, first part, fourth chapter, text 15 to 16, the science of devotional service is, and these are the various stages of spiritual advancement. So this is a hierarchy being described here. And this hierarchy is also mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and in other places. Very important. And we're going to go over this in a second after I read the Sanskrit and the translation. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu-Sanga Ta Vajana Kriya Tato Nartha Nivritti Shatato Nishto Ruchis Tata Ata Shaktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Yadan Shati Sadakana Mayam Prema Pradubhave Bhavet Kramaha. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who were spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instructions, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness and self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love for Godhead. Real love of God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. And let me finish the purport and then we'll go back to the verse. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. So let's go back to that particular verse that I wanted to comment on. So, let's go word by word. Ado, in the beginning, Shraddha. Shraddha means faith. And we've often translated Shraddha by breaking up Shraddha into two words, Shrak and Da, which basically means the heart giving. So faith, in one sense, means to give your heart, not just to believe that something exists. To believe that something exists is not really faith. Of course, in English, we don't really have too many distinguishing words, or words that distinguish between just belief and faith. Because, believe in the Lord, you'll be saved, or faith in the Lord, pretty similar, pretty synonymous. So, Shraddha. So in the beginning, one has some preliminary giving of the heart. Now, I was asked the question today, what really convinced me to take up Krishna consciousness? And it was an interesting question someone asked me. And I had been practicing Krishna consciousness before I was really convinced to just completely dive in. Sometimes when you're going swimming, the water's a little cold, and the only way you're really going to enjoy swimming is just diving in or going in fully rather than just putting your toe in. So, anyway, I was practicing Krishna consciousness, but there wasn't that final push that got me into the water. And what was the final push that got me into the water is that I met His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and I recognized him as my eternal spiritual master. So that's the Shraddha, the beginning. And therefore I did something that I never wanted to do, which is move into a temple and be with the devotees, because I valued being my regular self. Of course, my regular self was just an illusion under the three modes of material nature. So, in the beginning, there's that giving of the heart, at least initially, maybe not full giving of the heart, but it's just like, really, I want to be Krishna conscious. I want to serve Krishna. I want to transcend the material world. Or, for people really materialistic, as Krishna says in the Gita, Chaturvidha Bhajanti Mam, I want to get free from pain. I want to learn how to be successful, artha. And sometimes that's described as looking for wealth, but looking for some material benefit. Or another one, I'm looking for knowledge. Or another one, I'm just inquisitive, just trying to find out what's happening. So that's the beginning. Ado Shraddha. It's not complete faith, but it's the beginning of faith. It's like an interest, but a little bit of trust, a little bit of giving yourself, because you got to start with that. You got to at least go in the water. And tata, and then when you do that, you begin to do something called Sadhu-Sanga. Sadhu-Sanga means to associate with those who are sadhus. A sadhu is one who is engaged in the sat. That's interesting. Sat means the eternal nature of the Lord. Someone who's engaged in spiritual life, fully engaged, 24 hours a day. And Lord Kapila actually describes who was a sadhu. I'll give you that verse. Tatikshabala, Karunika, Surida, Sarvadehinam, Ajata Sachava Santa, Sadhava Sadhabhushana. So the bhushana, the ornaments of a sadhu by which it can be recognized, is that he's tatikshava. He's tolerant. That's pretty interesting. He's tolerant, just like Srila Prabhupada tolerated so much in giving us Krishna consciousness. That's very, very important. Tolerant means, heat and cold, happiness and distress. He's not complaining all the time. Like, no one loves me, the world is just so miserable. He just tolerates these things because he understands that matrasparshus dakontiya sitoshna sukadugada agama painam dashtamsa shibarita. That these things come and go. Happiness, distress, summer and winter. These things are just the dualities of this world. So, anyway, so one associates with a sadhu, sadhu-sanga ta, and when you associate with the sadhu, naturally you do what he does. You take him as a role model. And then there's that thing called bhajana kriya. It means the activities of bhajana. Now, the word bhajana is quite interesting. Bhajana, it comes by the same root that bhakti comes from. Bhakti means love, but it actually means to engage in worship with love. That's what the word bhajana means. And that worship in love may be your work. In other words, it doesn't simply mean sitting down in some temple somewhere and just going bhajan, doing some bhajan. Bhajan means like some song in relationship with Krishna or prayers or something like that. So bhajan means to actually offer your work, just like, or do bhajan in the temple, like that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmarpanam Brahma Havaya Brahmagno Brahmano Tam Brahmatena Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhanam. So if one is engaged in work for Krishna, practical work where the results go to Krishna, then that's bhajan. Work is worship. You've heard that before. But not all work is worship, but work for Krishna is worship. So bhajana kriya means the activities of bhajana, the activities of worship, doing that which is prescribed and avoiding that which is proscribed. Proscribed means things that are not allowed. And in that way, as one engages in those activities, there's a process called the cleansing of the heart, Cheto Dharpana Marjanam, which occurs. And so then the next stage is Tato Anartha Nivritti. That means you get rid of what's called the unarthas. Artha means something you want. Sometimes artha is translated as money. But in this particular case, artha or economic development. Artha, in this particular case, means things that you want, and anartha, you negate it, means things that you don't want. And what don't we want? Lust, anger, greed, illusion, because these things don't make us happy. Someone's lusty doesn't make them happy. Nowadays, of course, they give people lust pills to make them more lusty and makes them more miserable. So, lust, anger, greed. One's happy when they're satisfied with what they have, not by wanting more and more and more and more and more. Lust, anger, greed, illusion, thinking you are something that you're not. Fear, like that, being afraid, that's not very pleasant. And then finally, envy, being envious of someone. It just really hurts you to be envious. So anyway, you get rid of these things, which are impediments in devotional service. Tato nartha navritti shat. And then when you get rid of those things, you can be stable and steady. That's called nishta. Nishta means steady, 24 hours a day. And when you're steady, then you can attain a stage called ruchi. See, we're told tato, nishta, ruchistata. So ruchi means having a taste for doing something. It means you like it so much that you can't stop thinking about it. It's like if someone is in love, which doesn't last forever, but if someone's in love, they have a taste for the person. They can talk all day and night on the internet. I was going to say telephone, but that's old style. They can talk all day and night with the person, so they have a taste for that. Just like, I have a taste for devotional service. I have pictures of Krishna here, pictures of Radharani and her associates behind me, which you can see if you're looking at me rather than the book. So then a taste arises. I mean, a firm taste, not just coming and going. Because even in the beginning, you have some taste, but it comes and goes. And then, after that, after having a taste, then you come to the place of atashaktis, which shaktis means like complete attachment. Like I'm completely absorbed. And when you're completely absorbed, tato, bhavas, you get bhava. Bhava means emotions, but we're talking about spiritual emotions. I'm not going to get into a whole analysis, but there's different varieties of spiritual emotions, some of which are so intense you can't control them and you don't know when they're coming and when they'll go away. And other ones that remain with you 24 hours a day, all the astasattva bhavas, and other ones that you can manifest at your will, called the anubhavas. So you get some really ecstatic emotions. I mean, you see people sometimes who love Krishna so much they cry in ecstasy, with tears coming from the eyes like torrents of rain, just like we chant every morning that Maha Prabhu Kirtana Richa Gita Vaditrumadyan Manasorasena Romancha Kampas Rutaranga Bhajo Bande Guruchi Charanada Vinda. That the spiritual master, when he hears Lord Chaitanya's Kirtan, he starts dancing and chanting. And Richa Gita. Richa means to dance, Gita means singing. Just like Bhagavad Gita means the singing of God, or the song of God. Bhagavad is, Bhagavan is the name of God, so Bhagavad Gita means God's song. So now you know the meaning of this book, Bhagavad Gita, the song of God, which he took about 40 minutes to sing. So anyway, bhava, there's different types of bhava. And then after that you get prema. Prema means like pure love. I just want to please you, Krishna, and whatever you want, Krishna, you can crush me by your embrace. Leave me broken-hearted by not being present before me. You're completely free to do anything and everything, and you'll remain my worshipful Lord unconditionally. So that's prema. That's real love. Before reaching the stage of prema, one can have a few little slips, even in the stage of bhava. You can be diverted if you're not careful. So then, pradabhave bhavet kramaha, that these different platforms or stages, they follow one after the other. So we should be aware what platform we're at. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu-Sanga Tata Bhajana Kriya. So anyway, different stages of advancement in devotional service. Ultimately, we should aspire for prema. Now, the price of prema is intense hankering. It's called lolyum, which sometimes is translated as greed or hankering. I must attain this stage, the intense desire. That is the price. And sometimes Prabhupada would say the price of prema is tears coming from you. You have to cry for Krishna. And in that mood, one can chant the holy names, crying for Krishna. Ai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram. O son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant. But somehow or other I've fallen into this horrible ocean of birth and death. Please save me, fix me up as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So, anyway, we read that translation. In the prema stage, we read all that. So, very important verse, and now text 11 is also another important verse. Yetamam prapajante tam sataiva vajamyaham mama manavartante manusha partha sarvashaha. Yea, all who, yata as mam unto me, prapajante surrender, tan them, tata so, eva certainly vajami reward, aham I, mama my, vartma path, anuvartante follow, manusha all men, partha O son of Pritha, sarvashaha in all respects. All surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Everyone is searching for Krishna in different aspects of his manifestations. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is partially realized in his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence and as the all-pervading Supersoul dwelling within everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is fully realized only by his pure devotees. Consequently, Krishna is the object of everyone's realization. Thus, anyone and everyone is satisfied according to one's desire to have him. In the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude just as a devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as his supreme master, another as his personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. In the material world, the same reciprocations of feelings are there, and they are equally exchanged by the Lord with different types of worshippers. The pure devotees both here and in the transcendental abode associate with him in person and are able to render personal service to the Lord and thus derive transcendental bliss in his loving service. As for those who are impersonalists who want to commit spiritual suicide by annihilating the individual existence of the living entity, Krishna helps them by absorbing them into his effulgence. Such impersonalists do not agree to accept the eternal blissful personality of Godhead. Consequently, they cannot relish the bliss of transcendental personal service to the Lord, having extinguished their individuality. Some of them who are not firmly situated, even in the impersonal existence, return to this material field to exhibit their dormant desires for activities. They are not admitted into the spiritual planets, but they are again given a chance to act on the material planets. Those who are fruitive workers, the Lord awards the desired results of their prescribed duties as Yogeshwara, and those who are yogis seeking mystic powers are awarded such powers. In other words, everyone is dependent for success upon his mercy alone, and all kinds of spiritual progress are but different degrees of success on the same path. Unless, therefore, one comes to the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, all attempts remain imperfect, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. 2:3:10. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udadatihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one is without desire, the condition of the devotees, or desirous of all fruit of results, or is after liberation, one should, with all efforts, try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for complete perfection culminating in Krishna consciousness. Let me explain this verse from the Bhagavatam for you all. So this verse states that whatever your motivation is, some people have the motivation of just wanting to please Krishna. Some people have the motivation of just wanting to enjoy this material world to the fullest extent. And some people want to simply get the H-E-double-L, out of this material world. So whatever you want, you should, tivrena means like forcefully, but not in a bad sense, enthusiastically worship Krishna with love and devotion. Connect with Krishna, love and devotion. And in this way, you will achieve the supreme perfection. And so we have examples of people with motives that were not pure, coming to the complete perfection, even though their motive was not pure. Because they actually approached Krishna by his association, their motive became purified. And the typical example we use in this regard is Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was the son of King Uttanapada, and he had a very traumatic experience. His father had two wives, Suruchi and Suniti, and he was the son of Suniti, and Suruchi had another son. And Dhruva Maharaj and Suruchi was the favorite wife of Uttanapada, the king. And so, because Suruchi was the favorite wife, when Dhruva Maharaj tried to sit on his father's lap, she sort of said, you don't belong there, buddy. Only my sons belong there, and if you really want to sit on your father's lap, you've got to take birth as my son. Completely traumatic for the kid. So Dhruva left that place, and he went to his mother, and he said, his mother, what should I do? And she basically advised me, you got to worship God, and I heard that God is in the forest. And so, in the middle of the night, he just snuck out, went to the forest, met his spiritual master, and his desire was to have a great kingdom, and ultimately sit on his father's lap, but to have a kingdom greater than anybody in the universe. So he had a really intense material desire. So he goes and he meets his spiritual master. His spiritual master first says, hey, you're too young, not for you right now, and also you're a little hot-blooded, you're Kshatriya, so go back home. And he says, no, I'm determined. And then Narada Muni gives him his mantra to chant, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and he begins to chant it over and over and over again, gradually reducing his eating, reducing his drinking, reducing his sleeping, all the bodily activities he reduces to nil because of his determination for something material. But by the process of bhakti, as described here, Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param, he becomes so completely purified that when Krishna finally appears before him, he says, I was looking for something like broken pieces of glass, and now I have you. I found a beautiful gem, diamond, something really valuable. So he gave up that desire. So that's the point of devotional service. For whatever reason one takes up devotional service, for whatever reason one is enthusiastic, then that reason will become purified later on, automatically. It's not a question of artificially giving up that reason. And then one simply wants Krishna and becomes extremely happy like Dhruva Maharaj did. And there are other stories too. I mean, the story of Valmiki, which we told this morning in class. So text 12. Kang shanta karmanam siddhim yajanta iha devata kshipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Kang shantaha, desiring, karmanam, a fruit of activity, siddhim, perfection. Yajante, they worship by sacrifice, iha, in the material world, devataha, the demigod, shipram, very quickly, he certainly, manushe, in human society, loke, within this world, city, success. Bhavati comes, karmaja, from fruit of work. Translation, men in this world desire success and fruit of activities, and therefore they worship demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruit of work in this world. Prabhupada describes the worship of demigods to like someone bribing a government official. Now, in America, we may not relate so much to this. In India, at least previously, it was very prominent. For example, I'll give you one example. In my own life, once upon a time, many years ago, we were taking a tour around India with a bunch of devotees. I was leading the tour. And we rented a bus. And we took that bus all the way from Mayapur all the way to the south. Okay. And at a particular point, we went to this place called Jagannath Puri. And the hotel we were going to stay at is a very beautiful hotel. It's called the Birla Guest House. I recommend this highly for everybody who goes to Jagannath Puri. So anyway, so this guest house was in such a place that we couldn't take the bus, because it was prohibited. I guess it was a one-way road and things like that. It was blocked off by the police. So what happened is, instead of getting permission from the government to do it, we pulled up to the roadblock, and I told one of the devotees with me, who happened to be coming from India, a very nice devotee, I said, you take some money, go down, and you bribe the policeman, and he'll let us in. He didn't believe it was going to happen. So I said, at the same time, I said to all the devotees on the bus, just get down, don't look through the window. Because if you look through the window at the policeman, he will look up at you in the window, and he will see that you're not from India. And if he sees you're not from India, the price will go up 10 times. That's actually true. I've been to some holy places, and they had one price for people from India and another price for foreigners. Anyway, it was interesting. Some of the caves, Ajanta caves and things like that, we wanted to see one time. So anyway, I didn't pay the price. So we did that. We paid off the police, and we got in without getting the proper permission from the government. And, that's was the standard way of dealing with things. I don't know if it's still the standard way of dealing with things, but it was the standard way of dealing with things. So sometimes people want to get something from these, who are the demigods? Demigods are in control of different aspects of the material nature. And so, in one sense, it's quicker and easier to bribe one of them. Of course, it's just very temporary, the result we get from it, and also, it's illegal. And when you do illegal things, spiritually, you get caught. You always get caught. Why? Krishna says, I'm in everyone's heart. I'm witnessing everything. And also, Krishna relays all that information to this nice person called Yamaraj, who's in charge of justice. That's what Yamaraj, the king of justice. Justice Prabhu. So he relays that information, and you get your justice. You can't get away with anything. And of course, Krishna uses the word later on in the Gita, avidi purvakam. It is not the proper process, the right path. Avidi purvakam. So, anyway, you get quick results, but they're temporary, and they don't really give you happiness. So, purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, there's a great misconception about the gods or demigods of this material world. They're just assistants of God. Sometimes Prabhupada would call them like the cabinet members of the president or prime minister. And of course, Krishna's the president, prime minister, and he's God. And men of less intelligence, although passing as great scholars, take these demigods to be various forms of the Supreme Lord. Sometimes you will actually see people say, let us worship the gods. And if you go into a temple, some Hindu temples, they have like 10 or perhaps even more altars. So everybody has their favorite god, just in case you miss someone. You don't want to offend anybody. And actually, there's millions of gods, of demigods. So you really have to have a pretty big temple. So anyway, once upon a time, Prabhupada tells a story. There was a man, I believe was from England. He came into one of these temples, and he saw all these different altars. Actually, one of the altars had Krishna and Radharani. And he looked at all the gods, and he said, well, this one is really the supreme God. And the Pujari, who didn't know the philosophy too well, said, why are you saying that? Why do you think that? And he says, because here is Krishna with Radharani. In other words, here is God with his girlfriend. All the other personalities depicted in these various forms are actually working, doing something, meditating. But this one is playing with his girlfriend. In this way, even an Englishman who didn't have any training in the philosophy knew who actually God was. It's not that everyone's God, all the demigods are God, or the gods. So, actually, the demigods are not different forms of God, but they're God's different parts and parcels, like us. We can become a demigod. You can become Indra. You can become Brahma. You can become any of these different demigods. You can't become Shiva, but you can become many of them. Any of them what you want. Sure, you want to become a demigod, but it's temporary, and you get to have great power, and you're not happy because you're in anxiety, worried about someone else taking over your position. That happens. Sometimes even in the business field, if you have a higher position, you're more at risk for losing your job than perhaps someone in a lower level. So, God is one and the parts and parcels of many. The Vedas say Nitya Nityanam, God is one, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Or let me say, Nitya Nityanam means there are many eternals. There's one supreme eternal and there's many plural eternals. Ishvara Parama Krishna means there is supreme controller is Krishna. The supreme God is one. Krishna and the demigods are delegated with powers to manage this material world. These demigods are all living entities, Nityanam, like us, with different grades of material power. They cannot be equal to the supreme God, Narayan, Vishnu, or Krishna. Anyone who thinks that God and the demigods are on the same level is called an atheist, Pashandi. There's actually a verse that says this. To Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradi Daivata Samitvayanaiva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavatruvam. One who equates Krishna with the demigods is an atheist. Even the great demigods like Lord Shiva and Brahma cannot be compared to the Supreme Lord. In fact, the Lord is worshipped by demigods such as Brahma and Shiva, Shiva Vadinchi Nutam, Bhagavatam 11:533. Yet, curiously enough, there are many human leaders who are worshipped by foolish men under the misunderstanding of anthropomorphism or zoomorphism. Anthropomorphism basically means that because we are human beings of a certain nature, we think God must be like that too. You see that to a certain extent in, let's say, Christianity and people's understanding of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ in different countries is projected as looking quite differently. In certain countries he has darker skin. In certain countries he looks like a Scandinavian with blonde hair. In certain countries he has curly hair. It just depends on the certain nature of the people who are worshiping him, and they change the way he looks. Actually, he was more Semitic in complexion with curly hair because that's the part of the world he came from. So anthropomorphism means that our conception of what it means to be a person, we think that either that God looks like that, that's one variety of anthropomorphism, or we think that people are thinking that God looks like us because we look like that. And that's one of the arguments used by the atheists. Iha Devataha denotes a powerful man or demigod of this material world, but Narayan, Vishnu, or Krishna, the supreme Godhead, does not belong to this world. He is above or transcendental to material creation. Even Sripad Shankaracharya, the leader of the impersonalists, maintains that Narayana or Krishna is beyond the material creation. However, foolish people, Rita Jnana, that means they've lost their intelligence, that's Bhagavad Gita 7:20, worship the demigods because they want immediate results. They get the results, but they do not know that results so obtained are temporary, which is what I said before, meant for less intelligent persons. The intelligent person is in Krishna consciousness, and he has no need to worship the paltry demigods for some immediate temporary benefit. The demigods of this material world, as well as their worshippers, will vanish with the annihilation of this material world. The boons of the demigods are material and temporary. Both the material worlds and their inhabitants, including the demigods and their worshippers, are bubbles in the cosmic ocean. Insignificant. In this world, however, human society is mad after temporary things, such as the material opulence of possessing land, family, and enjoyable paraphernalia. To achieve such temporary things, people worship the demigods or powerful men in human society. Well, don't we see that in the present American government? Oh my God, I'm not going to make a political statement. If a man gets some ministership in the government by worshiping a political leader, he considers that he has achieved a great boon. and I'm going to add, and he keeps his mouth shut even if he disagrees with that political leader. All of them are therefore kowtowing to the so-called leaders or big guns in order to achieve temporary boons, and they indeed achieve such things. So kowtowing is a fancy way of saying a bootlicker, and that's a fancy way of saying something else, which I'm not going to mention in class. Such foolish men are not interested in Krishna consciousness for the permanent solution to the hardships of material existence. They are all after sense enjoyment, and to get a little facility for sense enjoyment, they are attracted to worship empowered living entities known as demigods or political personalities. This verse indicates that people are rarely interested in Krishna consciousness. They are mostly interested in material enjoyment, and therefore they worship some powerful living entity. And so, let's say, we'll take some questions. Actually, went on a little long tonight. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about Varnashram in a very famous verse. So we will, hold on a second, we'll unmute everybody, or allow you to unmute yourselves. Okay, you are officially allowed to unmute yourselves now. So, who has a question?
Dhanvat Pranam Maharaj, this is Abhiram.
Abhiram, good to see you.
How are you, Maharaj?
Fine, how are you? I haven't seen you for a while.
Actually a bit busy with some other stuffs and with my physios and everything.
Okay, so you're feeling better now?
Yeah, much more better.
Good.
Yeah. Maharaj, I got one question.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about the qualities of the demigods and the God, so when Krishna is having, if I'm not wrong, 64 qualities, why does then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he incarnates himself, he's having more than 64 qualities of Krishna?
More than 64 qualities? I don't think Lord Chaitanya, generally Lord Chaitanya doesn't play a flute, or he does have loving devotees. Of the 4 qualities that only Krishna has, generally we don't find Lord Chaitanya playing a flute. Lord Nityananda does. So I don't think those 64 qualities are usually applicable. I mean, I haven't found that list as applied to Lord Chaitanya, although he does have, let's say, the qualities, but certainly not the playing the flute quality. He does have unexcelled beauty, he does have intimate devotees, and he does have like amazing intimate pastimes. So maybe we'll give him 63.
So we will consider Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, or the incarnation of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of the Godhead?
Well, first of all, Lord Chaitanya is directly Krishna, but in the mood of Srimati Radharani. He is 100% Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani. But he doesn't manifest everything that Krishna manifests. He's called the Chana avatar. Chana means hidden avatar. So you don't see Lord Chaitanya going around playing a flute, for example. That's one of the 4 qualities that only Krishna manifests. But he does have all those qualities, but he doesn't manifest them all. Okay, that's more specific. That's a better way to express it. But he's not an expansion of Krishna. He is Krishna. He's Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani, and because he's in the mood of Srimati Radharani, he actually becomes more merciful than he normally is. Does that make sense or no?
Okay. Yes.
Okay?
I discussed a lot of time. Yeah. Yes.
You have other questions or?
Yes, ma'am. No.
No. Okay. All right. Good to see you again. So,
Thank you very much, ma'am.
thank you. I think Rishikesh has a question now.
Today I had a question about my relationship with Krishna, my specific relationship with Krishna. how, at what stage I actually know that? I mean, because right now, I'm just, really I'm accepting as a servant of the Lord. And whether I'm his friend or his material, all these things, when it can, is it the Guru reveals it or is Krishna revealing it?
When are you going to understand what your specific relationship with the Lord is? With the Lord is?
Yes.
That's the question. It will come when you reach the stage of Nishta. Nishta means steady and devotional service 24 hours a day. You will have some inclination or coming attraction where you'll begin to understand that. And it's not that the Guru will come up to you. That was done in the past with different types of qualified people. That the Guru would actually go to a disciple who was extremely qualified and say to the disciple that you are a gopi, or you are a coward boy, or you are a tree, or you are Krishna's assisting Mother Yashoda, assisting Nanda Maharaj, or something like that. So that was a different age. That's called Siddha Pranali. And this Siddha Pranali practice, although it is mentioned by Bhakti Vinod in his Jaiva Dharma, is not actually done or recommended to be done by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, nor by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So it will be revealed to you when it's time. And then you can verify. You can go to your spiritual master, or maybe come to me and ask me, Maharaj, am I a gopi? And I will say, you are Rishikeshini Devi Dasi. And your Rishikeshini Devi Dasi, and your service is, let's find that service, dancing for Krishna. Okay, but when at the proper time. But anyway, it can be verified confidentially with devotees. But it's not.
Till that time, Gurudev, till that time, I understand actually my relationship. What should be my bhava? What should be? How do I practice my devotional service?
Well, let's talk about that when it's time. How you practice it, you do internally. You internally serve according to Raganuga Bhakti, and this is really elevated. You serve the person in the spiritual world, which is called a Ragatmaka devotee, someone whose atma is filled with raga, like an eternal associate of Krishna. Let's say you're identifying, for example, let's say you're identifying as in the parental relationship with Krishna, then you may decide to follow in the footsteps and internally serve Yashodamayi. Does that make sense? And that's how you begin to follow in the footsteps and take that. You don't become that person, but you take that person as your role model in serving Krishna, and you serve that person.
So that comes only after Nishta, right?
That comes at Nishta, yeah. Ado Shradata Sadhu-Sanga. After you've pretty much gotten rid of most of the anarthas, you have to have we talked about that the other day in class, one has to have the adhikara, or the right to actually come to that stage. It's not a question of how many years you've been in the movement. It's a question of what stage you're at in devotional service. And then it's revealed. You get what's called the spurti. A spurti means you get a realization, basically, a revelation. And then that's who you are. And then you cultivate that in consultation with greatly advanced devotees. But right now, work on sadhana. Isn't it? Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangota Bhajana Kriya. Sadhana means Bhajana Kriya. We work on our Bhajana Kriya, and it's blissful. We work on the service we're doing for Krishna, and it's blissful. Because if we try to jump too high, prematurely, Prabhupada described that as trying to imitate Hanuman. And he had this nice quote He said, big monkey, big belly, Ceylon jumping melancholy. So in other words, if you want to jump over to Lanka, you're going to fall flat on your belly or your face, as the case may be. So we have to be ready for such a thing. And anyway, I mean, even when we are qualified, we consider ourselves not to be qualified. Then one of the symptoms of an advanced devotee is they think, I'm definitely not qualified, but somehow this realization has come to me by Krishna's mercy, but I have no qualification to have this realization. That's humility. It's not that we go on the internet and say, hey guys, I just realized I'm a gopi. And I'm gonna go to the doctor for some hormone treatment. Hormone treatment? So I can actually realize myself as a gopi. It's not going to be like that. It's internal. Let's say if someone was a gopi, it's actually internal. You don't show it externally. It's not that one day Rishikesh is going to come with lipstick on his face. Boy, that would be pretty ugly. Anyway, lipstick, and you get some false eyelashes, sorry, not eyebrows. Eyelashes that are fluttering in the wind. It's not like that. Nobody could tell except for yourself and your intimate associates. So, but that's the goal. Yes, the goal is to realize who we are and to serve Krishna in an unalloyed fashion in that transcendental body. That's called Siddha Deha. Your transcendental body. And you're called Jivan Mukta. That even in this life, Jivan Mukta means that even as you're in this world, you are liberated. But be patient. Utsahan Nishya Darya Tatat Karma Pravartana. Be patient, enthusiastic, convinced, determined. That's nice. I'm personally not worried about it myself. I just want to please Prabhupada. My whole meditation is on pleasing Prabhupada. I just identify myself as a servant of Srila Prabhupada. And, of course that means I'm also a servant of Krishna. And I just want Prabhupada to smile on me. I'm not so advanced like the rest of you. I just want to serve Prabhupada and please Prabhupada. So the rest of you are more advanced than me. You're all gopis or Manjari gopis, or what else would you be? Or at least coward boys or something like that. I'm just a servant of Prabhupada. And you have to forgive me because I'm not on that level. So anyway, so on that happy note, this servant of Prabhupada has to end because actually it's late. And I got Mangal Arti and a few things to do before I take rest. And tomorrow is Sunday here. And tomorrow is Monday in New Zealand and Australia and Fiji. And so our class tomorrow will be a half hour earlier at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That means at 5 o'clock in the evening, Eastern Standard Time Sunday, 9 o'clock in the morning, that is Fiji Standard Time, FST, if that exists, and New Zealand Time, New Zealand Standard Time, NST, and Australian Standard Time is 2 hours earlier. That means, for those who don't know, that's 7 o'clock in the morning, Monday. So it's Monday in New Zealand, Monday in Australia, Sunday for us in America, and in Europe, it's like the middle of the night. It's still Sunday, but it'll be 11 o'clock at night in Central European time. Okay, thank you very much. All glory is to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Haribol. Okay, that's 13. 13 is next. Okay.